That way it's following statute and also board policy when it comes to hearings. So just making everybody aware that the audio recording will be kept at central office here at 628 East Mulvane Street, Mulvane, Kansas, if requests are needed for the record here for the audio record. Today is the 12th day of April 2021. The time is 6:18. We are here for a hearing requested by Mrs. Payton, representing others, who is alleging that, in summary, Kansas Senate Bill 40 now requires all actions and policies regarding COVID-19 will be narrowly tailored to respond to the state of disaster emergency, and requires local boards of education to use the least restrictive means to achieve such purpose. The aggrieved parties submit that the USD 263 Board of Education has not met these criteria. So just in informational, this is a quasi-judicial hearing in accordance with the state statute and board policy. All pertinent information should be brought to the attention of the board for it to have complete information before reaching a decision. The hearing committee consists of the USD 263 Board of Education members. My name is Dr. Jay Inslee, and I am the superintendent appointed to facilitate the efficient adjudication of the hearing. I'll be leading us through the hearing procedure this evening. We'll have the following Board of Education members present: Mr. Chris Hershey, Mr. Fred Hershey, Mrs. Crystal Smith, Mr. Steve Fry, Mr. Jeff Ellis, and Mr. Dave Sanders. Representing USD 263 is Dr. Raquel Greer and Mr. Brad Canfield. The complainants are represented by those who will be presenting, speaking, or providing testimony. I, as a hearing officer, will soon swear in the witnesses who wish to present evidence or testimony. This will include, once again, those who will be presenting on the complainant's behalf and those representing USD 263 for this hearing. So, if you plan on speaking and presenting evidence, if you will, raise your right hands. Yes, thank you. And do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you present in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I'm noting that all that have raised their hand has sworn in. Thank you. Very good. Now we will begin by reviewing the complaint. For this, I will read verbatim what was written on the request and the letter. So I will go through those points. First, point 1. Despite Kansas Senate Bill 40, Section 1.3, during any such disaster emergency, the State Board of Education, the Governor, the Department of Health and Environment, a local health officer, a city health officer, or any other state or local unit of government may provide guidance, consultation, or other assistance to the Board of Education of the school district, but shall not take any action related to such disaster emergency that affects the operation of any school or attendance center of such school district. Subpoint, Dr. Inslee announced on March 25th, 2021 in a YouTube video that mask wearing will be retained because the quarantine criteria has not changed. On USD 263's website under COVID-19 resources, the website indicates if there is a confirmed COVID-19 case at Mulvane Public Schools, we will work closely with Health Department when we have knowledge of a positive case to identify close contacts and quarantine expectations. Subpoint 3, according to the COVID-19 response protocol for Mulvane schools, updated March 11, 2021, the protocol was created based on guidance from CDC, KDHE, and Sedgwick County Health Department in correspondence dated March 10, 2021, modifying the Mulvane High School Learning Mode. Principal Glenda Cowell stated, these procedures have been updated in cooperation with the Sedgwick County Health Department following Sedgwick County Health Department updates to the school quarantine protocols. These actions to modify, amend, reaffirm the response protocol have relied heavily upon guidance and mandates from the CDC, KDHE, and the Sedgwick County Health Department. Point 2, all COVID-19 response protocol for Mulvane schools which mandate any action by any students or employees of a school district while on school property have remained in place despite Senate Bill 40, Section 1C stating that they must be revoked. This includes COVID-19 testing, masking, social distancing, quarantines, and limitations on spectators at athletic and other extracurricular and school-sponsored events. Point 3, Kansas Senate Bill 40 now requires all actions and policies regarding COVID-19 will be narrowly tailored to respond to the state of disaster emergency and requires local boards of education to use the least restrictive means to achieve such purpose. We, the aggrieved parties, submit to the USD 263 Board of Education has not met this criteria. That's the alleged complaint. Thank you. This hearing will be conducted as an informal hearing, and strict rules of evidence will not apply. However, testimony received must be relevant. A party's representatives may make such objections to testimony or documentation as they see fit, and I, as hearing officer, will consider such objections. The hearing will be conducted in an orderly manner. Each side will have an opportunity to present its witnesses and documentation in support of its position, as well as be able to cross-examine the other party. So to the hearing, for opening statements, for the complainant, does anyone wish to make an opening statement? And once again, we'll just make sure that we'll unmute it so you can be heard and recorded there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your attention to this matter tonight. I really do appreciate, I know I've said it to a couple of you, I really do appreciate your sacrifice of time to be here. No, it's not your normal time. So I am grateful for Dr. Inslee and the assistance that he's helped in setting up this hearing. You will hear tonight from a parent, Mark Kilborn, and myself, and then Dr. Granzel. And my name is Lara Payton. I'm a mom in your district, and I'm here to speak for our children and staff who no longer have some choices in their lives for over 7 hours of each day. I can assure you that there is an army of parents who can't be here, or they were afraid to step forward for whatever fears that they have. Healthy people being forced to wear masks is of great concern to me and many, many families and staff in this school district, as are the quarantining and other restrictions you have placed in our schools. Because of Kansas Senate Bill 40, you are not constrained by outside governmental parties, so we respectfully request that you sincerely and with open hearts listen to those of us who have quite valid concerns about your continued and extremely restrictive COVID-19 policies. Thank you.
Just to interject, sorry, Mr. Kilborn, there will be a time for you guys to present a larger body of evidence, if that's fine, and maybe that's for the gentleman. Okay, so opening remarks yet? Okay.
Yes, sir. My name is Mark Kilburn. I have 3 students in the district. My biggest concern that I want to bring, I don't want to get too much in details as to, there's so many things out there. The mask does this, the mask do that, they don't do this. We don't really get into all that. But I know since they have started back to full-time classes, they have come home nauseous, headaches, can't focus, run down. And my kid has a lot of kids around bunches, but I have 3 kids with ADHD. One with severe ADHD, and the other one has severe ADHD with 2 other disorders, and he is a Tasmanian devil. He is 90 miles an hour, all going nowhere. Comes home, hits the couch. And it didn't start until he came back and had to wear the mask all day. When we were doing remote learning, didn't have any problems. Normal kids, they do the schoolwork outside, playing around. It only started when they had to wear them all day. One of my children says they have to wear them during recess. You cannot exercise, exert yourself with the mask, breathe it in out, carbon dioxide, and breathe it right back in. That doesn't work. This all started once they went back to full mask all day. That is my concern. I have friends that are in the district, didn't want to come, didn't want to put their name on there. Their kids are experiencing the same things. Not saying you have to take a mask completely away, but during certain times that is too long from going from no mask to straight mask. And it does pose a physical, I feel, a physical restriction on them that could cause further problems, oxygen deprivation. I spent 14 years in special forces. I've been in gas masks 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months. I know what it can do. And that is with respirator holes to where you have the filters. There is no filters on these. These are kids. When they start feeling a certain way because of the mask, this poses a psychological thing because they can't process what's going on because they don't know what's going on. So they're going from a little bit of freedom to right there in one space. They can't process that in their minds because they're little. adults, we can process that. My sons would come home, my two little ones, they're 10 and 12. And they're like, Dad, I can't breathe. I feel like everything's closing in. That's claustrophobia. That can also cause other issues psychologically that a lot of these kids don't need because they can't process it. You know, they don't understand what that means. We know we're in a tight space, claustrophobic. A child don't know that. They have no idea what that is. So I would ask you, as a board, with all these kids, it's not just my kids, it's all the kids. We need to come together and figure out a way to where we can still have them safe, but keep them healthy at the same time. That's the biggest thing. So, thank you.
Good. Any other opening comments before the body of evidence from complainants? Is this an opening comment?
Yeah.
Okay, school district representatives, do you have any opening comments as well? No? Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have to check both sides. So yes, hold on just a second. We'll go. All right, so Ms. Payton and or representatives, you may now present your information and witnesses. Thank you. Yes, now, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
I think I unmuted and everything should be okay. You are unmuted? Yeah, I think so. All right, thank you very much. My name is Richard Granzel. Just clarify, I'm not a doctor. I am a physician assistant by trade. I also used to be a county commissioner, and I've worked with public health officials, so I know a lot of the people involved and a lot of stuff that's going on. But more importantly, I'm also a parent of a high school student, and so I've done a lot of research and got a lot of information, and so that's why I've been asked here to speak on behalf of the families here. So the board requirements, we've kind of already talked about. The main thing is SB40 now requires school boards. Any action taken has to be narrowly tailored to respond to the state of the disaster emergency and use the least restrictive means to achieve such purpose. I would argue there might be a time in this last year that these things were necessary and would be considered the least restrictive, but I think as we go through the data, I think it'll become clear that that's not the case now. This is a very difficult bar to reach, and I think it, in my opinion, is virtually impossible. I mean, least restrictive would mean anyone can come into the school, those who want to wear masks, those who don't. Right now, your policy restricts attendance and entrance to school facilities only to those people who wear masks, regardless of whether they've had the vaccine, regardless of whether they've had the illness themselves and have natural immunity, regardless if they have concerns as parents or students with respect to the physical, emotional, social, and educational harm that may be brought to their kids. The question, keep in mind that we were told all this year about certain data points that were the justification for everything that we've done in schools and throughout the community. The number of people in ICU, the people in the hospital, was a big thing. The percent positive case, all of these things were data items that were used to justify this. And the question is, do those data items matter now? They did then when they were used to justify, but now that they're all golden, why haven't we reversed this? It seems like we keep moving the bar. Okay, I would argue that if we had the same data, same numbers as we do right now, back then, we would have never instituted all of this. Okay, so let's just proceed. Here's the hearing purpose. Dr. Hensley already went over that. So narrowly tailored, least restrictive, we would argue that if you rescind your response protocol, which, by the way, is no longer required by the state, by the local communities, and the health department cannot require it either. So right now, you're continuing to do contact tracing and quarantining. Well, that's not your responsibility. They're supposed to be doing that. We'll get more of that later. They are responsible for doing that. They can't require you to do that. Okay? You should be able to focus on education. Let them focus on this stuff. And we recommend you do these other things, recommend vaccinations, hand washing, keep hands away from your face, cough in your elbow, stay home when you're sick. Wear a mask if you choose to. Manage medically fragile students through online learning and online learning for those who prefer that option. These are least restrictive things, and they're common sense. They're good things regardless of what the virus is, flu even. And I think you probably have some of these policies. You know, you're not supposed to come to school when you're sick, but you do it anyway, don't they, right? You have that every year. These sorts of things are the things that should be tailored, that would be narrowly tailored and least restrictive and be appropriate given the current data. All right. First thing I want to say, K through 12 students, it's safe. It is safe to do this. Now, there's a lot of fear that's been put out there. Some of it's appropriate, some of it has gone far beyond what it needs to be. There are a lot of people in the medical community kind of shake their heads at some of these things we're doing, but we're in an atmosphere where they will not come out and say anything, okay, because they'll get lambasted in the media, they'll get attacked, okay, but I'll talk about some of these things as we go through. We need to understand there's a different viewpoint. We have said so many negative things that people are terrified, okay, beyond what is reasonable. I know adults who won't go out into the backyard, okay? I know people, I mean, we have people who've had the disease, they've been vaccinated, and we're still telling them to wear a mask. That makes no sense to me, okay? Now, the CDC says the risk of complications for healthy children is higher for the flu compared to COVID-19. How many of you have heard that? Nobody's heard that. It's been on the website for months. We've known from the very beginning that kids were the least affected than adults. It's by age. The older you are, the more health issues you have, the greater your risk of death. 78% of the deaths have been from nursing homes in Sedgwick County. Okay? The risk of complications for healthy children is higher for the flu compared to COVID-19. Okay? I've talked to my friends of the county commission and other people said, listen, we have gotten so much fear and so much groupthink going on that it's going to be hard to de-escalate this. We need to start doing it. Okay? We need people who've had the vaccination or had the disease, they need to be able to take their mask off because the rest of society needs to be able to say there's life after COVID, right? And it's just the reality. We can't do this forever. Beyond that, teachers and staff have been vaccinated. Okay? My understanding is you've had about 70% of your staff vaccinated. Now, when we talk about herd immunity, no one knows the exact number, but they usually estimate 70 to 80% of the population need to have immunity. That's either by, it doesn't have to be by vaccination if it's vaccinated or if you've had the virus. So if you've had people who haven't been vaccinated but have had the virus, you can throw them in on the numbers for herd immunity. You're already at 70%. So you have a disease which is less risk to your children than the flu, and you have the adults who've been vaccinated. So if this were the flu, would you be doing this? Here's the big picture. No county health order, no state health order, no city orders. WSU has repealed their mandates, so their college kids can now walk around without any mask and intermingle. By the way, I have 2 kids at K-State. My son was in a fraternity. His whole fraternity got it. He didn't get tested, but he got sick. I have a junior in Valley Center. You know, he tells me, oh, I got sick here a while back. I've had it, but I just didn't tell you. In fact, my kids or my friends and everybody's kind of figured out, don't tell anybody if you're sick, otherwise you get kicked out of school for a couple of weeks. Renwick, USD 267 has repealed their mask mandate. Sunrise Christian Academy, Trinity Academy, Central Christian Academy. I think you also need to know that there's been some private and public schools in this state that have never had a mask mandate or social distancing the entire year. Okay, but you don't hear about that either. I've spoken to a couple moms from Andale. I met and their kids, they absolutely love it. They're happy. They're smiling. I mean, when you have masks on for everybody, it creates a negative atmosphere. It does affect our psyche. We're social people. When you take masks off and start interacting, you see people, you see the expression that makes a difference. I talked to a counselor today who said he does drug and alcohol counseling. He was doing a 2-day thing, and they all had to be masked because he was doing it for a governmental entity. But they didn't want to do it, and halfway through, they just stopped wearing their mask, and he just gave it up. But he said, when they took their mask off, it changed the whole dynamic. Everybody just started expressing, talking about it, and it changed everything. Okay? So, it does make a difference. Now, that being said, do your kids really wear the mask correctly and all the time, or the teacher for that matter? Or what about the kids before school? They're out and around, playing around, jumping around, interacting with everybody before school, right outside the building, or maybe at home with their other kids, and then they go and put the mask, and is it really necessary? Is it really effective? Or is it just imposing this negativity? All the county metrics are good, green. 2 cases, death and serious illnesses have plummeted. Vaccinations are open for everyone 16 and older, and the elderly and high risk that have had the opportunity for vaccination, they have openings. Okay, if you want to get vaccinated, you can. The whole intent was to protect the hospitals and protect the high risk elderly people from deaths and serious illness. We've done that. Another factor is the spring. Weather is a positive factor. Wind and sun. I mean, there's absolutely no reason. I passed by here, and there were some kids playing soccer outside here, and the parents out there, none of them wore masks. Have you ever heard of an outbreak outside when the kids are playing? It makes no sense, okay, to have people outside wearing masks when they're playing sports. It's just wind and sun. UV light kills organisms, kills viruses. The wind disperses it, okay? And keep in mind, 0 cases is not the goal, and it's unrealistic. It was never to have 0 cases in the community or anywhere else. It's going to be endemic, just like the flu, okay? So we have to learn to live with it. Unless you're prepared to wear a mask the whole time, you have to be willing to accept there's going to be some cases, but we also have to have confidence in what we know. What did the CDC say? The flu poses a greater risk for children than the coronavirus, and everybody else can be vaccinated. The curve, we talked about we need to bend the curve. Just give us 2 weeks. I said this over a year ago. Give us 2 weeks, and we need to bend the curve. Now we're here a year later. We're still trying to talk about all this, but the curve has been annihilated. Let's look at the data. Positive test percentage. First of all, this is not, well, it's changed 3 times. This comes through the World Health Organization. When it first started, it was about 8 to 10%. Then I think it went up to 15 to 20. Now the recommendation is 5%. And it's not an exact number. Dr. Mann, the local health officer, said around 5%. If it's 6% or for 7%, I'd be okay. 8 or 9 would be too high. Here's the percentage since we started. I go to the next page. Here it is for the last 6 weeks. We've always talked about, usually all the mandates said, if we get it below 5% for 2 weeks, then we can think about doing this. Now it's been 7 weeks. It's been under 5%. It kind of fluctuates up and down. Doesn't matter if it goes up and down as long as it's below 5%. Now, let me explain what this percentage does. Is if you have 5% or less, that means with the number of tests that you're doing, you're capturing all of the cases. That means you're not missing any. Okay? Now, that may mean you only find 5 cases in a day, but if it's below 5%, that means you caught them all. Okay? If you caught 5 cases and you had to do the low number, and that was 50, let's say you only did 10 cases, and you caught 5 of them, 5 is a low number, but that's 50% positive. That means you probably need to do more testing. So what this tells us is our testing numbers, the amount of tests we're doing, is adequate. We know we're not missing any, basically. And now I took some data from Sedgwick County's website. This is all from their dashboard over the two-week period, 28 March to 2 weeks, because that's what they consider to be the cycle. Over 12,000 tests, there were 359 positive tests. That's an infection rate for the entire county of 520,000 of 0.07%. For that 2-week period, only 0.07% of the population got infected. So the non-infection rate was 99.937, or 99.93% of the people in Sedgwick County did not get it in 2 weeks. That's an A in anybody's book. Keep in mind, we can't get to 0. So if this is not good enough, and I'm telling you, if these were the numbers to begin with, we never would have had these mandates. But if that's not the right number, what is? And keep in mind, the people that are getting it are the people who aren't at risk anymore because they've been vaccinated. We're up over 80% of elderly have been vaccinated now. I think it's in the state of Kansas. That was just recent from today. Okay? So the people are getting on their low-risk people. That's why the deaths are down too. So we'll go down to hospitalization and ICU. Remember, this is the big. We're going to overburden the hospitals, and for a while had come up with extra room and extra space. Last time I checked this was just a few days ago. We're down to 8 patients in the ICU. That is the fewest number we've ever had since they started tracking. Fewest number ever. I don't know that we'll ever get to 0, but what's the right? It's going to oscillate. So what's the right number? If we're lower than what we've ever been, why are we still doing this? Here's the Sedgwick County new death rates, new deaths. Look back in January 131, they had 15 in a week. This last week we had 0. The week last before 3 and 1. Okay. These are the things that matter. Sedgwick County personal protective supply. This is one of the things they looked at. It was an issue early on. Now that was a supply chain issue. These have been green for a long time. County cases. This is when the data went and when they started, symptoms started. You can look at that. We're way over here on that far little tiny right. That's where we're at. All right. Well, that was the big picture. We're going to talk more about K-12 students. I've already talked about a little bit, but I want to reiterate what the CDC says because this is so vitally important. I'm not saying this. I provided you documents from their website where they say this. They say that the risk of complications for healthy children is higher for the flu compared to COVID-19. That means if our kids get it, we don't have to be fearful. We shouldn't be more fearful than if they got the flu. Okay? Every year we have children die in America from the flu, but we don't hear about it. We don't go through this stuff. Okay? Problem is, parents don't know that because no one tells them this because it's all about the negative, the fear. Beyond that, teachers have been vaccinated. Now, we've known this, and I'm giving you some numbers here. We've always known that kids are less likely to spread it, and it's harder for them to get it. Okay? Here's some data here. There again, this is in the documents that I gave you. People 20 and under are 43% as susceptible as those older. That means they're 57% less susceptible to getting it. Okay? 20 and younger have viral loads. That means how much virus they have in their bodies. So the more you have and you cough, the greater chance you have to spread it to someone. Okay? So if your viral load is lower, there's less chance. Because transmission it's a quantitative. It matters how much is in your system and how much you disperse and how much your body is exposed to. You can be exposed to a certain amount and nothing ever happens. Okay? But with kids, they have 63% lower viral load than what adults carry, which affects the likelihood that they're going to spread it. But keep in mind, if one kid gives it to another, the risk of complications is less than the flu. Back in December, when a lot of schools, I don't know what you guys did, but a lot of schools were hybrid and then they went online because the infection rate went up. But even Fauci said it didn't make sense to close the schools or do that. You didn't need to because they were getting, and even eventually my hometown admitted this, they were getting the virus from at home because they weren't wearing masks, they were doing whatever, they're having parties, everyone was inside than the school, okay? So if we wouldn't, once again, if we wouldn't do it before the flu, why would we do it now? And remember, we need to be narrowly tailored and least restrictive. So what we're asking is about individual freedom, individual responsibility at this point. I think you could make an argument back when we were in those peaks, those things, maybe this was necessary. But you're seeing it, but I just don't think you can say that now. More on the K-12 students, once again, the CDC thing. Now here's something about the flu. Since 2004 to 2005, flu-related deaths in children reported have ranged from 37 to 187 deaths during H1N1. There are 358 flu-related deaths. In 2017 and 18, there was 187, but the mathematical models accounted for underreporting. Evidently, all of this stuff is always underreported. They think the actual deaths of children in America in 2017, 18 was 600. But yet we never heard anything about it. We didn't do any of this, okay? It matters that kids die from the flu, but we have to understand the risk compared to the flu and understand what we've known all along, that the risk from the coronavirus is greater as you get older and weaker. 78% of the deaths are in nursing homes, okay? Immunity is important to many of us, especially for children. It means they need to be exposed to viruses and organisms. That's how they develop their immunity. Some of us care about that and would prefer that our kids be exposed to some of these things. Now, we don't like them when they get sick or when they get the flu, but that's how you develop your immunity. That's how your immunity it's a natural process. I would argue for those of you who've been immunized, disease, you need to take your mask off so that you are exposed to it again. Remember, vaccinations are designed to prevent death or serious illness. Doesn't mean you won't ever get sick a little bit, but you're not going to die. You're not going to go to the hospital, okay? But each time you're exposed to it again, that's like a booster shot. No different than injecting something in your arm, okay? And the question is, who, at this point, given the numbers, who should get to make the decision whether their kids are exposed to all these community things? You know, the government, the school board, or maybe the parents. Let's empower the parents at this point in time to make that decision. The mental and emotional trauma is very real and important to recognize. It does affect our perception of life and how we exist, okay? It makes a difference. Whether UV light kills the virus and when disperses it, T-cell immunity. So I want to make sure you understand, we have antibodies. We all talk about how long will the antibodies last? Well, maybe a few months. But what's left behind are T cells. These are cells that then are able to create more antibodies when you're exposed to it again. So that prevents you from getting it, or if you do get it, it's very minor. Okay? You can have T-cell immunity from viruses for decades, regardless of whether you have antibodies in it, okay? There again, our immune system is so robust, we don't talk about it in detail, but this is important. And what about herd immunity? You've talked about herd immunity. You need to understand that herd immunity is a combination of people who've gotten it naturally and those who've been vaccinated. I don't know the exact number, but they do estimate between 70 to 80%. Now, I've provided 2 articles, one of which they're both from the same doctor. In February, he suggested that we'd be nearing herd immunity by now based upon all the data, and I think we're seeing that he's actually come out to be true. If you look at I'm going to go back, all these numbers here, all the positives, they started to go down. When these cases went down, you cannot explain that by the vaccine by itself. The vaccine early in January was geared towards those who were the oldest and at higher risk, so it did start to have an immediate effect on the deaths and severe hospitalizations. It hadn't been widespread enough. If you read those articles, I can't go into detail. There's some interesting stuff in here. I'll talk to you about how people that had the Spanish flu in 1918, I think 80 years later, they found some virus and tested them for T lymphocyte protection, and they still had enough in there to protect them, okay? But we don't know how much natural immunity we have because Sedgwick County, Dr. Menz and the health department refused to do antibody testing. As far back as last May, there were commissioners who wanted to do antibody testing to see how many, because you're not catching everybody because you have asymptomatic people, right? And plus the tests were up at 13 and 20%. How much asymptomatic people out there, how close we were to herd immunity, they refused to do it. So we don't have that data, but it has to be playing a role in these numbers. Okay? And those articles have some information about some other communities who have been doing it that might provide some insight. Knowledge and diversity of opinion are important and should be encouraged and modeled to parents, students, and teachers all the information and let them decide for themselves. I don't think we've done a good job in the community. Well, not in any community. In the media, politics, schools, whatever you want to say. Have we really had an honest discussion of all of these things? Have both sides been able to make arguments? I don't think it has. It's been very one-sided. That's why people are so terrified. And we're recommending and doing things that really just make no sense. It doesn't, playing sports outside. Why are we worried about that? You've been vaccinated, you've had the disease, and you're still being told to wear a mask, things like that. All right, now let's talk. I know you're probably getting emails from KDHE and Cedric Health Department. I want to clarify a few things. Okay? I think they're trying to bully and intimidate you. Okay? Telling you have to do things you don't have to do. I've got some. I included an email that was with related to Derby. I've heard the same things in Valley Center. They're telling me about these quarantine statutes. Okay. Well, first of all, these quarantine statutes are for KDHE and the local health department. It authorizes them to quarantine people, but not the school districts. It doesn't compel you to do it. You're not even talked about it. It's not your responsibility. And I know they've given you those guidelines. Those guidelines are not mandatory. I've included an email from Sedgwick County where they say it's not mandatory, but they're trying to push you to do their work. And they're doing it in a way, I think, that's trying to force you to keep the mandates, which I think violates SB40. Okay? Threatening you, well, if you have someone who's positive, we're going to make you quarantine all of these people. Well, first of all, they can't make you do anything because you need to just step back and say, hey, listen, we're not going to do contact tracing. We're not going to do this quarantine because we want to focus on education. Parents get mad at us anyway, so you do it. And then they should. That's their job. Okay, they cannot make you do it. So there's another KSA that says require schools and facilities to not admit any person with an infectious or contagious. That's true. You're not supposed to admit anyone with a contagious condition, but that doesn't change whether or not you should make this decision. That law has been in effect since 1901. I mean, it applies to the flu. And we're not saying if somebody has a kid has a coronavirus, you got to let him in. No, you can do that. These laws, all these laws that we're talking about, have been in effect for years before, and they're going to be in effect tomorrow. They're not specific to the coronavirus. So you need to ask yourself, if these are the justifications they're trying to use right now, then why can't they use them next year? Because it's not going to go 100% away. Are you going to tell me you're going to require kids to wear masks all year long? They're going to push you to do it? Think about it. Why are they bringing this up? Okay? You don't do this for the flu, and this is not coronavirus specific. But yeah, they can quarantine if they want to. We'll make them do that. Let them deal with the parents. Okay? I think they're being bullies. They're trying to intimidate you to force you to do that, force you to keep your mask mandate. The schools have been politicized, I think, from the very beginning. Remember, Governor Kelly closed the schools last year with 3 months to go, or 9 weeks. The first state in the country to do it, even though we had 5 cases statewide. The CDC never recommended shutting down schools. There were plenty of other states that had a lot more cases than us, but they didn't shut down schools, right? And the CDC has always said that their recommendations, you do not have to follow any of them. You can and should tailor them to your local environment. So if someone says CDC says this, first of all, some of it's irrational, but beyond that, for example, they will tell you that if you're in a room full of people, unless 100% of the people have been vaccinated, you need to wear a mask. Does anyone here really think it's rational to say that we're going to have 100% of people vaccinated? No. But nevertheless, they have said that you can tailor it to your local area. They don't know what's going on here, and that's what we're asking you to do. This is about the limitations. It says that no local health officer, city health officer, Department of Health and Environment can force you to do anything. Okay? I think the threats by KDHE and Sedgwick County Health Department are clearly intended to affect the operation of the schools. Threatening a large number of quarantines if schools don't follow their high-risk, low-risk guidance, which is no longer required and relevant, is a clear attempt to force schools to continue the mask mandates. I ask you, please take a stand against this bullying. I've been given some information really that you guys have quarantined some people at the suggestion of the health department. This includes kids who were playing sports inside and outside, kids who took off their mask for a very short period of time to participate in some sort of musical or band type thing for a few seconds, and then they say, oh yeah, quarantine those people. I think they're trying to carry the water for the KDHE and Governor Kelly. That's my impression. They're trying to force you to do some things that make no sense. You're telling me they took their mask off for a few minutes throughout the day and now they have to be quarantined? for a disease that they have a lower risk of getting, and if they do, poses less harm than the flu. So keep the kids in school. Focus on school. Let them do all that stuff and deal with the parents.
We do need to start to wrap up, or else we're going to have to adjourn for the next meeting.
Sure, we haven't had time to present our full case. I was going to also present, and so we've gotten.
Okay, so we're going to have to adjourn and we'll have to reschedule. We have to start the next meeting on time. So that's why I tried to mention that at the beginning.
Remember that it is required to have the hearing within 72 hours. I only have one more slide.
We do have to start the 7 o'clock meeting at 7 o'clock.
Okay, as I said, you have the CDC, teachers and staff. The quarantine requirements are no longer a requirement. Contact tracing and quarantines are the responsibility of the Sedgwick County Health Department. Don't let KDHE and the Sedgwick County Health Department bully you. The emotional, social, educational, and physical harm brought on by the COVID-19 response protocol requirements is greater than the potential exposure to the virus.
Okay. Thank you. We do have to adjourn. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I please,
We can't.
I just want to reiterate.
A motion by Steve, I'll entertain a second. Second by Chris. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have 1 minute. So if you guys want to take a bathroom break, you need to quickly.